You clear the last plate and sit down. Somewhere in the next room, someone releases a tired breath. Your shoulders rise before you decide anything. A moment later, you are standing again, asking what is wrong, already abandoning the quiet you told yourself you wanted. The work was finished, but your attention had already begun searching for what everyone else might have forgotten. Nothing urgent has happened. No one has asked you to intervene. Still, another person's discomfort enters your chest as an unfinished assignment. You call this concern, but concern could notice without immediately taking command. What happens inside you is more binding. The instant someone near you becomes unsettled, your rest begins to feel like neglect. At work, a colleague leaves a question unanswered, and you begin preparing to complete their part. At dinner, a partner grows quiet, and your voice changes before you know whether the silence concerns you. During a family visit, you track who is offended, who is withdrawing, and which subject must be changed. By evening, your jaw aches from holding together situations no one knew you were managing. This did not begin in the adult rooms where you now feel it. Long before you managed schedules, conversations, and other people's unfinished responsibilities, you learned to manage a family from inside it. The surroundings have changed. The assignment has not. What once made a child feel necessary now keeps an adult from ever feeling completely off duty. Even an empty afternoon becomes evidence. You tidy what is already clean, check on someone who did not call, and plan for difficulties no one has mentioned. When nothing needs your attention, you do not experience completion, you experience exposure. Activity gives the vigilance somewhere respectable to go, while quiet leaves you alone with the feeling that you have abandoned a duty you cannot name. There is a second meaning underneath the first, and it is harder to admit. You are not unable to rest only because you carry too many responsibilities. You keep discovering responsibilities because they make your inability to rest appear reasonable. A full calendar protects you from seeing the deeper rule. You cannot stop while someone might still need you, or while another person's disappointment remains possible. That rule has no natural ending. There will always be a worried relative, an uncertain partner, a delayed task, or a child whose life cannot be arranged from the outside. If rest depends on the emotional settlement of everyone around you, rest becomes impossible by design. The condition can never be met. That is why the role never releases you. What appears to be exceptional responsibility is therefore carrying something more private. You do not merely want the people around you to be well. You need their stability to release you from watchfulness. Their calm becomes permission to breathe. Yet even calm cannot be trusted for long. It may only mean that the next disruption has not shown itself. So part of you remains standing while the rest of you sits down. This is where the adult habit begins to point backward. You did not merely grow up in a family with problems. Every family has problems. You learned that the emotional functioning of the family could quietly become a child's assignment. Perhaps no one announced it. The role may have arrived through praise, relief, repeated reliance, or the absence of another person willing to hold what was happening. You noticed when a parent was near the limit. You knew when a sibling needed to be distracted, when money should not be mentioned, when a question would deepen an argument, and when your own disappointment had to wait. These were not abstract observations, they altered your behavior. You became easier before anyone requested ease. You became useful before anyone admitted that usefulness was needed. The family may remember you as unusually mature. They may tell stories about how little trouble you caused, how sensible you were, how naturally you helped. Those memories can contain affection and still conceal the central fact. Your maturity reduced pressure on the adults. The quality they admired in you also made it possible for them to remain less aware of what the family was asking from a child. Managing did not always mean solving the visible problem. Sometimes it meant preventing your face from showing that a problem existed. You swallowed fear so a parent would not feel guilt. You reduced your excitement when someone else was struggling. You learned to arrive with the emotion the family could accommodate, until even your inner life began organizing itself around what the room could bear. Nothing here requires turning them into villains. Some were overwhelmed, some repeated what had been required of them, some loved you sincerely and mistook your adaptation for temperament because that interpretation was easier for everyone. But love does not cancel structure. A child can be loved and still become the person through whom a family avoids feeling its own instability. What you learned was more precise than responsibility. You learned that safety was something you produced. If people were calm, you had done something correctly. If conflict appeared, you had missed a cue. If someone withdrew, you searched your behavior for the cause. The family atmosphere became a private report card that was being graded continuously. Although no one admitted there was an examination, that belief follows you into adult rooms where it no longer belongs. A partner becomes quiet after a difficult day, and you assume the silence contains a message about the relationship. A friend answers briefly, and you search for what you failed to notice. A manager appears distracted, and your concentration divides between your work and the imagined problem you may soon be required to solve. The reaction arrives before evidence. Your throat closes, your attention sharpens, and an ordinary pause begins to feel like the opening of an emergency. By the time the other person explains that they are merely tired, you have already reviewed the conversation, adjusted your tone, and prepared 3 forms of repair. Their mood passed through you as a command before it became information. The old arrangement also appears in moments of resentment. Someone asks a simple favor, and your answer remains warm. But heaviness moves through your stomach. You do not resent the favor alone. You resent that they did not first calculate what you were already carrying. Then you conceal the reaction because the person who manages everyone is not supposed to require management. That hidden anger reveals a wish you rarely state. You want someone to notice before you explain. You want another adult to see the accumulating weight and remove something without being instructed. Yet asking directly can feel more exposing than continuing to carry it. Competence has become both your burden and your protection, from discovering whether anyone will respond to your need. This is not empathy in its simplest form. Empathy feels with another person. Your old training converts feeling into obligation. You do not merely register distress, you begin organizing yourself around its removal. The distinction explains why you can be deeply caring and secretly exhausted by closeness. Other people's inner lives do not remain beside you. They become work occurring inside you. Jung used the word persona for the social face a person develops to meet the demands of the world. He did not mean that this face was simply dishonest. It can be intelligent and necessary. The suffering begins when the useful form becomes the only self allowed into relationship, while every tired, uncertain, needy part must remain outside. The excluded parts do not disappear. They return indirectly through irritability when someone asks for one more thing. Numbness during occasions you planned for everyone else, or fantasies of going somewhere no one can reach you. You may judge these reactions as selfish because they contradict the person you believe yourself to be. Yet they carry the life that compulsory usefulness kept postponing. The deeper wound, then, is not only that you had to do too much, it is that doing became your most trustworthy evidence of value. This is why being appreciated may soothe you less than being needed. Appreciation recognizes an action that has ended. Need gives you a position that continues. It tells you where to stand, what to notice, and why your presence cannot be dismissed. Being necessary can feel safer than being known to be known. You would have to reveal preferences that inconvenience someone, limits that cannot be negotiated away, and needs that another person might fail to meet. Necessity avoids that exposure. If the structure depends on you, you do not have to wonder whether anyone would choose you when you are not solving, soothing, remembering, or carrying. On a Saturday with nothing scheduled, you sit down and feel your heel begin to lift from the floor. Within minutes, your eyes are moving across the room for something unfinished. No request has arrived. No emergency is forming. Still, the quiet begins to feel like evidence that something is wrong somewhere and that you have failed to notice it. This hidden bargain is why simple rest can provoke such unease. When you stop functioning, you do not merely lose activity, you briefly lose the identity that guarantees your place. The quiet asks a question busyness has always answered for you. If nothing needs to be managed, what makes your presence legitimate? The body responds by finding another task before the question can become fully conscious. Notice how quickly leisure becomes service. A day meant for recovery becomes a meal prepared for everyone. A quiet morning is given to a relative's paperwork. A shared holiday becomes an operation whose success depends on your anticipation. Later, while others enjoy what you created, you feel both indispensable and absent. You were present as the condition of the experience, not as one of its participants. That absence creates a peculiar loneliness. People may be grateful to you and still know very little about what it costs to be you. They see the finished meal, the remembered detail, the softened conflict, and the answer that arrived before they had to worry. They do not see the constant internal monitoring that made these things possible, partly because you trained everyone to experience your labor as effortless. You trained them because effortlessness preserved the role. If they saw the strain, they might help, but they might also question whether you could continue being the person on whom everything rests. The shadow complication begins here. Your family assigned you a function, but adult competence may have helped you defend it. Control can hide inside care, when care is the only acceptable way to control what happens next. Managing reduces uncertainty. It lets you choose the timing, anticipate disappointment, and prevent others from failing you in ways you would have to feel. The cost is severe, but the reward is real. As long as you are carrying the arrangement, you do not have to discover who would step forward if you stopped. You do not have to meet the possibility that some people would let the thing fall. This does not make your generosity false. It makes it psychologically expensive. Real love can exist inside a compulsory role, just as resentment can exist beside devotion. The adult who cannot rest is divided between the sincere wish to care and the buried wish to be released without having to ask. One part keeps offering, another waits for someone to recognize that the offering has become a captivity. Each time no one recognizes it, the conclusion arrives quickly. You must remain vigilant. Yet your vigilance also prevents the moment that would reveal what others are actually capable of carrying. The house is quiet, no one needs anything, and there is nothing left for you to prevent. Rest is not yet peace. It is where the old family arrangement begins to lose its disguise. You are sitting with a person you have rarely been allowed to meet, wondering whether care can remain real when management stops, and whether belonging can survive your inattention. That person is difficult to meet because adult life has often been arranged to keep them unnecessary. The old function does more than occupy your time. It shapes which workplaces reward you, which relationships feel familiar, and which forms of affection you trust. Without intending to, you may have built a world that continually calls forward the exact person who knows how to disappear into responsibility. At a family meal, the same argument begins between two people who have repeated it for years. Before either voice rises, you ask a practical question, shift the conversation, and give one person a reason to leave the table without embarrassment. The meal continues. Everyone feels the tension pass. Only your spine remains stiff, holding the impact that disappeared from the room. No one thanks you because no one saw the intervention. That invisibility is part of what makes the arrangement efficient. If the family recognized how often its calm depended on your adjustments, it would also have to recognize that calm was not naturally present. Your skill protects them from this knowledge while preventing your effort from becoming visible enough to be shared. The role is reinforced through relief rather than command. Someone says they do not know what they would do without you. A relative calls you the sensible one. A manager places another urgent matter in your hands because you never let things fall apart. Each sentence sounds like recognition, but each one recognizes the function more clearly than the person performing it. Rarely does anyone declare that your needs do not matter. Something quieter happens. Your needs are treated as less urgent because you appear able to carry them alone. Your tiredness can wait because someone else is visibly distressed. The better you become at containing yourself, the less evidence others receive that containment has a cost. Competence erases the address to which care might have been sent. At work, a project begins to fail because several people avoided a decision. The manager does not ask what the delay has cost you. Instead, they say that you are the only person they trust to repair it. Pride and heaviness arrive together. The praise sounds personal, but its practical meaning is immediate. Someone else's unfinished responsibility has just crossed the room and become yours. This is the second truth beneath dependability. Praise did not merely reward your strength, it transferred weight toward the person least likely to refuse it. The more calmly you carried what arrived, the more reasonable the transfer appeared. Soon, responsibility was no longer assigned according to ownership. It was assigned according to who could absorb it without disturbing anyone else. The arrangement did not only ask too much from you, it translated your need for support into evidence that you deserved greater trust. Instead of being relieved, you were relied upon. Instead of being asked what you needed, you were told how capable you were. Responsibility arrived where reciprocity should have been, and the substitution was flattering enough to remain difficult to name. Your body often recognizes the substitution before thought does. Breath shortens when someone says they have a small favor. The neck stiffens at the phrase, "Only you can handle this." Sunday evening acquires the weight of work that has not yet begun. Still, you may call yourself busy because busyness sounds temporary, while the deeper problem concerns the position from which nearly every demand reaches you. Over time, knowledge accumulates around that position. You know the passwords, the appointments, the family histories, the sensitivities, and the sequence in which problems must be handled. Others consult you because you hold the map, yet every new detail makes stepping away more difficult. The burden grows partly because the information required to share it has been allowed to live almost entirely inside you. This creates a closed form of indispensability. Delegating one task now requires explaining 10 hidden details, so doing it yourself appears easier. The choice is practical in the moment and costly across years. Each efficient rescue adds another fact to the private map. Eventually, your exhaustion seems to prove that no one can replace you. When no one else has been permitted enough experience to learn the terrain, relationships can reproduce this structure with greater intimacy. You may feel drawn toward people whose uncertainty gives your sensitivity a clear purpose. Their unspoken feelings become legible to you. Their difficulty naming needs allows you to demonstrate devotion through anticipation. The connection feels deep because you are reading so much, even when very little of you is being read in return. The affection may be entirely real. You may love them, and they may love you within the form the relationship has taken, but the form matters. If closeness is organized around your capacity to understand, confusion in the other person gives you a secure role. Mutual clarity can feel strangely quiet because it offers less for your old intelligence to interpret, repair, or make safe. Someone emotionally steady may ask what you want instead of making you infer what they need. The question can leave your mind unexpectedly blank. Distress, ambiguity, and urgency give you immediate direction. Direct interest asks for something less familiar. It asks you to appear without first creating relief for someone else. And the absence of a task can feel like the absence of a self. At a restaurant, another person places the choice in your hands. Rather than noticing appetite, you scan their face, remember what they ordered last time, and select the option least likely to disappoint them. The decision looks considerate. Inside, something has vanished before it could become language. Preference was present for a moment, but responsibility reached it first. The difficulty becomes sharper when help is offered. Your mouth may prepare a refusal before you have measured the burden. You say that completing the task yourself will be faster, and often that is true, yet the chest tightens as another person reaches for what you are carrying. Assistance would expose how much strain was hidden behind the appearance of ease. Help also arrives imperfectly. Another person may act slowly, overlook a detail, or complete the task differently. The old role experiences these differences as proof that receiving was a mistake. You step back in, correct the process, and feel both relieved and abandoned. Their contribution disappears, while your conclusion remains. It is easier to depend on no one. The deeper loop becomes visible here, because you rarely receive imperfect care. Other people get little practice caring for you, because they lack practice. Their first attempts confirm your distrust. Independence then appears to be a fact about your strength rather than a relationship pattern reinforced from both sides. What protects you from disappointment also prevents mutuality from becoming skilled. The shadow enters through the refusal to admit that giving can feel safer than receiving. As long as you remain the giver, no one has enough access to disappoint you in the place where you are actually dependent. In Jungian terms, an old complex organizes perception before conscious choice appears. It selects what feels urgent, enlarges certain cues, and produces a familiar response with the force of necessity. The present situation seems to demand immediate action, but an older expectation is already speaking through it. If you do not restore order, your place inside the relationship may become uncertain. This expectation changes your experience of time. The day is rarely allowed to be only the day you are living. It contains preparations for future needs, recovery from earlier demands, and attention to problems developing beyond your reach. Even when nothing is active, the mind maintains a waiting area for what could arrive. Time belongs to possibility before it belongs to you. Unclaimed time, therefore, exposes more than fatigue. There is no mood to regulate, no result to secure, and no visible need through which preference can disguise itself as duty. The silence asks what you would move toward if usefulness offered no direction. Exhaustion has answered that question for years by making desire seem unavailable, impractical, or too small to matter. The unlived life does not always return as a grand ambition. It may appear as irritation when a free hour is claimed by someone else, sadness while watching another person enjoy something without justification, or an unexpected sense of loss when you cannot answer what sounds like an easy question. These reactions are evidence that function has occupied space once meant for ordinary experience. Family relationships preserve this occupation through memory. They contact the version of you who knows what to do because this is the relationship everyone has rehearsed. A crisis revives the old distribution immediately. Others become confused, emotional, or unavailable, and you become clear. The speed of the transformation can make the role appear natural, even when clarity is the last thing you actually feel. Affection makes the pattern harder to question. These may be people you love, people who sacrificed in other ways, and people whose limitations you understand with painful accuracy. Because the relationship contains tenderness, you may conclude that the function cannot be examined without betraying the bond love and labor become fused. So any reduction in labor begins to resemble a reduction in love. Everyone receives something from this structure. Others receive steadiness without having to study how steadiness is produced. You receive a recognizable place without having to test whether simple presence would be enough. No one asks whether closeness could survive without the service. The arrangement remains stable precisely because the most dangerous question is never allowed to become practical. Its deepest cost is not simply exhaustion. Psychological adulthood becomes distributed unevenly. You become practiced at anticipating, tolerating, and repairing, while others remain less practiced because the consequence rarely reaches them intact. The more capable you become, the less capable the surrounding system appears. Your strength and their dependence begin confirming each other. Interrupting this pattern does not immediately reveal freedom. It first reveals missing capacity. Someone may struggle with a task you used to absorb. A relative may sit inside discomfort you once translated. A partner may fail to notice what you hoped would be obvious. These moments can feel like evidence that withdrawal is cruel, when they may also be the first honest measurement of what the relationship can carry. What begins here is not a simple permission to do less. It is the frightening return of information. You do not yet know who can learn, who will refuse, who will meet you differently, or which parts of the old structure will collapse when you stop protecting them from consequence. Rest waits inside that uncertainty, not as comfort, but as the moment reality continues without your correction. Reality continuing without your correction is precisely what the old role has rarely allowed you to witness. The first difficulty is not the unfinished task itself. It is the meaning that gathers around your refusal to complete it. A problem remains visible. Another person walks past it, and the old conclusion forms immediately. If you do not carry this, no one will. One evening, you leave a small household task untouched. You do not announce an experiment or ask anyone to take over. Hours pass. Another person notices the task, then continues with their evening. Heat moves into your face. Your jaw tightens. The task has become secondary. What hurts is that no one has recognized the silent decision you believed should have been obvious. Anger arrives with a familiar accusation. They saw what needed doing and left it for you. Sometimes that accusation is accurate, yet another truth stands beside it. You had begun a test without revealing its terms. You wanted someone to detect the limit you concealed, volunteer for the labor you had always made effortless, and understand the meaning of a silence you had trained them not to notice. Rest exposes this private contract. For years, you gave more than was asked, then hoped the depth of your giving would teach others how deeply to see you. The hope was human. The contract was invisible. When others failed to fulfill it, resentment seemed to prove their indifference, although they may never have understood what your competence was asking them to recognize. This is the harder reversal. You were not only trapped by responsibility, responsibility also protected you from the risk of making a direct request and receiving a direct answer. Silent labor allowed hope to remain intact as long as you never asked clearly. You did not have to discover who would respond, who would negotiate, and who would simply say no. The arrangement therefore preserved more than belonging. It preserved ambiguity. You could believe that people would care for you if only they fully understood, while continuing to hide the evidence that would make understanding possible. Exhaustion kept the question unresolved. It hurt, but it protected you from the cleaner grief of knowing exactly what another person was willing to give. None of this excuses indifference. Adults can benefit from labor they have chosen not to examine. Families can rely on one person while ignoring visible strain. Partners can become comfortable inside an unfair distribution. Psychological maturity does not require turning every failure into your responsibility. It requires distinguishing what others refuse to see from what you never allowed them to see clearly. That distinction is difficult because the old role gave you moral clarity. You were the one who remembered, repaired, arrived, and endured. Others were the ones who forgot, delayed, or depended. The facts may support much of that story, yet the story also offered a protected position. If you carried everything, you never had to examine where care ended and silent judgment began. Silent judgment can enter through standards. No one else knows they are being measured against. You notice who failed to anticipate, who needed reminding, and who rested while work remained. Outwardly, you say nothing. Inwardly, an account is being kept. Every unrecognized effort becomes another entry, and affection begins carrying the weight of a debt that has never been presented. The body reveals the account before speech does. A familiar request produces a flat voice instead of warmth. The stomach hardens when someone relaxes near you. Shoulders remain lifted while everyone else settles into the evening. Later, you insist that nothing is wrong, because naming the resentment would also require admitting how long you have participated in making the arrangement look acceptable. From a Jungian perspective, shadow does not mean that your care was secretly false. It means the caring identity could not admit everything living beneath it. Anger, refusal, envy, need, and the wish to be carried had no acceptable place in the person you learned to present. They did not vanish. They gathered behind virtue and appeared through exhaustion. Envy may be especially difficult to recognize. You watch someone rest before every task is finished and feel contempt for their carelessness. Beneath the contempt may be grief for a freedom you were never able to claim. Their ease confronts you with a possibility your identity cannot permit. They are not proving that rest is wrong. They are exposing how completely you learned to make rest conditional. Sometimes the reaction moves in the opposite direction. A person offers sincere support, and irritation appears because they have arrived after years of absence. Their help feels too small, too late, or too poorly executed. The judgment may be fair. It may also protect you from the vulnerability of receiving something that cannot repay the past, but could alter the present. The old account wants total recognition before it will allow partial repair. It wants another person to understand every burden, regret every omission, and finally offer care equal to what was given. Anything less can feel insulting, yet no present gesture can return the years already spent. Waiting for perfect repayment may keep the wound loyal to the very arrangement it condemns. This is where rest becomes grief-bearing. When you stop adding new labor, the old labor becomes easier to see. Time that once disappeared into usefulness returns as memory. You notice celebrations you organized but did not enjoy, conversations you carried while no one asked how you were, and mornings when fatigue was treated as another problem to overcome rather than information. Grief does not arrive only for what others failed to provide, it also arrives for the choices you made while believing there was no choice. This recognition can feel cruel if handled without tenderness. The younger adaptation had reasons. The adult repetition had rewards. Both truths belong together. You were formed by an arrangement, and you later helped the arrangement continue because it remained familiar. Somewhere in that house, a child was learning to read a room faster than the room could read them. That child was not being difficult. That child was being useful, because usefulness was the safest thing available. The phrase "helped it continue" may sound like blame. It is not. Participation is not the same as authorship. A person can inherit a role they never requested and still become skilled at protecting it. Recognizing that skill returns agency without rewriting the past. It shows why change cannot depend entirely on other people finally understanding what they have received from you. Agency first appears in uncomfortable places. It appears when you notice the task and do not immediately decide who should complete it. It appears when a request enters the room and you allow your own reluctance to become information. The mouth may still prepare agreement. The chest may still tighten, but the reaction is no longer mistaken for a command. This interval can feel almost unbearable. Without automatic service, every act of care becomes a choice, and choice introduces responsibility of another kind. You can no longer claim that goodness simply happened through you. Sometimes you will give freely, sometimes you will give from fear, sometimes you will refuse out of exhaustion, and the refusal may be imperfect, delayed, or poorly expressed. The shadow asks you to tolerate that moral complexity. Becoming less governed by the old role does not make every new response wise. Buried anger may emerge too sharply. A limit may arrive after resentment has already poisoned the tone. Someone who did not create the original wound may encounter the force of it. Rest does not automatically make the unlived parts gentle. There may be days when you withdraw from a simple responsibility and call it self-protection, although another person was reasonably depending on you. There may be conversations in which you expect understanding while offering no explanation. The end of compulsion does not erase obligation. It makes genuine obligation harder to distinguish from the reflex to manage everything. This distinction cannot be solved by a rule. The same action can arise from devotion on one day and fear on another. The same refusal can protect integrity or punish someone silently. What matters psychologically is the growing ability to notice which part of you is acting. The useful persona no longer receives automatic authority simply because its behavior looks good from the outside. A message arrives on a Tuesday evening asking whether you are free this weekend. You read it twice. The old answer is already formed, and your thumb is above it. You set the phone down instead and let the question stay open for 10 minutes. Nothing is decided for 10 minutes. The answer belongs to you and not to the room. At first, this awareness may increase fatigue. The old pattern was exhausting, but it was efficient. It made decisions before you had to feel conflict. Now a request can produce several truths at once. You may care about the person, resent the timing, recognize a real need, and still lack the strength to respond. Conscious choice is slower than obedience. Relationships feel different inside that slowness. The pause before your answer becomes visible. Someone may repeat the request because they assume you did not hear. Another person may begin explaining why their need matters. Their words reveal how accustomed they have become to immediate access. But they also reveal something about you. Your quick agreement had prevented them from learning that an answer was required. The first spoken limit may therefore sound strangely ordinary. You say that you cannot do it today. No history is presented. No childhood role is explained. The other person may accept the answer, appear disappointed, or ask again. Whatever happens, your body receives the moment as larger than the sentence. The hands cool, the throat tightens, an old bond seems to be waiting for a verdict. If disappointment appears, guilt will offer the fastest escape. It will tell you to repair the atmosphere before the relationship reveals anything further. The temptation is not merely to help, it is to restore the familiar version of yourself in the other person's mind. Their comfort once confirmed your goodness. Their discomfort now threatens to make your refusal feel like an act of harm. Yet guilt is not always proof of wrongdoing. Sometimes it is the sensation produced when an old identity loses obedience. This does not mean guilt should be ignored. It means guilt must be examined rather than instantly obeyed. A real obligation can survive examination. A compulsory role usually demands action before any distinction becomes possible. What follows may not look like rest. It may look like sitting through another person's disappointment while every muscle wants to improve the scene. It may look like allowing a task to be completed badly without taking it back. It may look like recognizing resentment before turning it into coldness. These are not victories. They are encounters with information, the old role continually removed. The information may hurt. Some people will step forward only after delay. Some will contribute when the request becomes clear. Some will resent being asked to carry what they assume belonged to you. Others may reveal limits that are not malicious but are still painful. Reality becomes less flattering than hope and more useful than resentment because it no longer depends on invisible tests. There is grief in losing those tests. They allowed you to imagine that perfect recognition might arrive without the humiliation of asking. They kept alive the fantasy that someone would finally notice everything and release you. Letting the test end means accepting that being known requires speech, risk, negotiation, and the possibility that another person may understand and still decline. So the adult who could never rest begins by meeting something harsher than tiredness. The burden was real, but innocence was not complete. Love was real, but so were control, judgment, fear, and unspoken demand. None of these truths cancels another. They leave you unable to return fully to the old role, while offering no painless identity to take its place. The task remains where you left it. Someone may notice, or no one may notice. Your body still prepares to rise, but for one unresolved moment, you can see the difference between a responsibility that belongs to you and a silence, asking whether you will make yourself necessary again. That difference does not arrive as certainty. A responsibility may genuinely belong to you, and the old role may still insist that 10 surrounding responsibilities belong to you as well. The work now lies in the pause between noticing and obeying. Nothing dramatic happens there. A familiar demand appears. The body prepares to move, and for a moment the assignment is not automatically accepted. The task you left untouched may eventually be completed by someone else. It may be handled later than you would prefer, or in a way you would not have chosen. It may also remain exactly where it was. Each outcome offers different information. None offers the perfect reassurance the old role wanted, because reality does not promise that stepping back will make other people immediately responsible. Some people notice the pause before they notice anything else. They ask why you seem distant, tired, or less like yourself. What they call distance may be the absence of anticipation. What they call change may be the first visible interval between their need and your response. They are not necessarily accusing you. They are trying to understand a relationship whose timing has altered. Family members may say that you used to be easier to talk to. They may remember how quickly you calmed an argument, arranged a plan, or knew what everyone meant. Their memory can contain genuine affection. It can also contain attachment to the relief your function provided. They may miss you while still confusing you with what became easier whenever you were present. This confusion does not require a cruel interpretation. People often love through the forms a family makes available. They may never have learned how to approach you without bringing a problem, because problems were where your importance became most visible. When you stop organizing every encounter around usefulness, both sides may discover how little ordinary relationship was practiced. A conversation can become awkward when no crisis supplies its direction. A relative describes a difficulty, then waits for your solution. You listen without offering one. Silence enters. They may repeat the details, assuming you have not understood. For once, the discomfort remains between two adults rather than becoming a private instruction inside your body. The silence may eventually produce a question. They ask what you think they should do, and the request becomes explicit rather than assumed. This small change matters because an answer can now exist. You may offer a thought, decline, or admit that you do not know. Care is still possible, but it is no longer required to arrive before language. At work, the shift may look less intimate and more practical. A delayed project reaches the point where you would once have repaired it quietly. Instead, the delay remains visible long enough for ownership to become clear. A colleague explains what happened. A manager has to decide where responsibility belongs. The system becomes less smooth, but the hidden distribution of labor becomes harder to deny. Not everyone welcomes this visibility. Someone may call you uncooperative because cooperation once meant absorbing the consequences they avoided. Another may simply feel anxious because your reliability helped them function. Their response can reveal dependence without proving malice. People are often most resistant where an old arrangement protected them from a capacity they never had to develop. The body may interpret every reaction as confirmation that you have gone too far. A critical tone tightens the throat. A disappointed face brings heat into the chest. Sleep may become restless after a refusal that was entirely reasonable. The old assignment remains active enough to translate social friction into moral danger. Even when conscious thought understands that disagreement is not abandonment. This is why the change cannot be measured only by how peaceful it feels. Peace may come later, inconsistently, or not in the form you expected. The first evidence is smaller. You feel guilt and do not immediately convert it into service. You hear disappointment and remain able to ask whether an actual obligation was neglected. The emotion stays present without becoming the final authority. Some relationships begin to reorganize around this slower response. A partner starts asking rather than assuming. A sibling learns that your silence is not permission to place the decision in your hands. A colleague approaches with a specific request and accepts that the answer may be no. These shifts may be incomplete, but they show that closeness can acquire a form other than automatic access. Other relationships may reveal a narrower capacity. Someone continues contacting you only when something has gone wrong. They show little curiosity when no help is needed. Seeing this can hurt without requiring